Data silos is a big problem in that kind of thing where, if I've got 4 different systems or 4 different spreadsheets where I'm keeping things, it makes it really hard to have like that true 360-degree view of that relationship with a donor that you may be trying to work with or trying to engage with.
Well, welcome, Matt. As the co-founder and CEO of DonorDock, you are perfect to talk with us about donor data. And I know we both agree that we should be making data-driven decisions as nonprofits. So I thought maybe we could just start with some of the basics that, what kinds of donor data should we be collecting?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when we think about donor data, so like there's this big spectrum, right? You have like core data that you want, and then there's kind of ancillary data that can be really helpful. But I always say like don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good when it comes to this, because I think in a lot of cases nonprofits feel like, well, if I can't get all of it, then maybe I shouldn't get any of it. But when we think of like core data that you definitely want to be trying to track about donors specifically, contact information is probably one of the most fundamental things. Like you may not be able to get, a bunch of contact information, but maybe you can get. You always need a name. I think a name is key. If you can get one other piece of contact information, an email address, a phone number, an address, that can be really helpful and really powerful. So trying to have some way that you can communicate and engage with those donors is really key. Demographic information can be really helpful. That one's kind of, generation and or other types of demographics that can really help you target communications. Communication preferences, I think, is super important. Not every donor wants to be communicated in the same way across the same channels. And so kind of understanding how each of your donors wants to be communicated with. Is it over email? Do they like to get a text message? Do they love to get a phone call from you or a postcard? It really kind of depends. But that helps you really tailor your engagement strategy to your donors. Giving history is another really kind of fundamental thing and can help drive a lot of insights and analytics around donors. Those are a few things that just come to mind right off the top of my head and really kind of fit more for me in that kind of core data that you really want to try and be tracking. But we have a really good article out on our website for 10 key data points that you want to be tracking. Those are 4 or 5 of that list, but there's more information there that can be probably pretty helpful for people.
Okay. I will list that in the description as well so people can go and check that out. Now, I know I talk a lot about how I love thank you calls and how they're a great way to collect more data, but what are some other suggestions for how you would get this data?
Yeah, well, I mean, you hit one of them right off the bat. It's like talking to people, talk to your donors, ask them these questions. I think sometimes we're always looking for some kind of automated or solution that's going to like do that type of stuff for us. But I think that being willing to ask your donors, like, how do you want us to communicate with you, and what's important to you, what areas of impact, or what programs are you most interested in that we're doing? Like talking to people is really important. I think also you can put and leverage like surveys of your donor base. So electronic type surveys that you send out asking them to, update their information so that you have appropriate contact information for them that's up to date and accurate. Even collecting some of that stuff through things like online donation forms. So making sure that your donation forms are asking for like an updated address, an up-to-date address, even collecting phone numbers. I think you got to be really careful that you don't make too many things required when people are doing these things, because I think you can kind of hurt your conversion when it comes to getting people to actually fill those things out. But trying to use technology to help you with that. And then there are tools like NCOA, so National Change of Address, being able to leverage that database to have and be able to put your data through that and get back, again, up-to-date information or contact information can be helpful. But I think you can also gather insights. Again, if you're collecting data, you can start to gather some insights that maybe are coming from analyzing and looking at data. So, for example, let's say you send out a big bulk email to a large number of your donor base, and you can start to look at who's engaging with those emails, and are they opening emails, are they clicking those emails, and those might be people that you can infer then like to get emails from you. Whereas if they're never engaging with your emails, then maybe a different method of communication would be preferred by them. So lots of different ways to do it. But I'm with you. I think that talking to donors, whether that's in person through thank you calls, I think that can be a really, really powerful way to gather that information and make sure that it's accurate and up to date.
Mhm. Yeah, I love thank you calls and just the relationships that I build and the notes that I make in their donor profiles and how it just really bonds you to them
Yeah.
and bonds them to you as well.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in the whole relational aspect of fundraising, and just how important it is that we don't get into this trap of feeling like we are going to over automate everything. Like there's still this like human component that's a key part of really effective fundraising. And so things like thank you calls, handwritten thank you notes, like those go a long way in really building that relationship with a donor.
They do. They do. I'm surprised with how many donations I make and I just get the automated
Yep.
that automated email and that's it. So here's the big question.
Mhm.
How do we use that data? Because, I know there's a lot going on with machine learning and how it's going to do all this stuff, but the old fashioned way, where we actually comb through our donor database, and because that's not perfect. I mean, a lot of this
Mhm.
AI is not perfect. So,
Yeah.
what's your advice on going through our data?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it helps if you can have technology that makes it easy to get data back out. There's a lot of systems out there that you might put a lot of data into, but if it's not easy to analyze or easy to use or easy to pull back out in a meaningful way, then it just becomes busy work that you're putting it in and not getting any value out of it. So I think, first of all, having the right tools to help you do this. Data silos is a big problem in that kind of thing where, if I've got four different systems or four different spreadsheets where I'm keeping things, it makes it really hard to have like that true 360-degree view of that relationship with a donor that you may be trying to work with or trying to engage with. So trying to get your systems and your data centralized or at least integrated where those things are talking with each other so that you do have that full picture. And then I think it's just taking the time. We're all very busy. Our nonprofit customers, they wear so many different hats oftentimes within the organization. And so, really taking that time it's a lot easier to just, send out the same postcard to everybody or the same email to everybody and hope that that gets results. But at the end of the day, taking the time to really leverage your data, and we go back to some of those core data points: communication preferences, what are programs that they're interested in supporting that you're doing. All these things kind of go together. Even like their donation preferences, do they like to give online or do they mail you a check twice a year? All of that kind of goes together, and if you can have tools and technology that makes reporting on that easy, and then using that data, now you can start to segment your donor base out and say, this group of donors prefers this type of communication. They prefer to give through mailing us a check. And so maybe sending a postcard to them with our address and some information about a program that they care about, maybe that's going to be more effective than just blasting out the same email that we sent to everybody else, hoping that they all of a sudden change their preferences and how they give and how they want to be communicated with. And so it's some of it's just putting in the effort to not only collect the data correctly and segment the data, but then to actually use that when it comes time to engage with donors. And I think we see that to be a lot more effective than kind of I'm going to just do everything the same way. And I hope that it connects with donors. We have another resource. We have an ebook that's really a lot about that topic that is, how do I use the data to actually more effectively engage with my donors? And it goes into more detail on those topics, but there's no substitute for, just actually putting in the effort to try and respect what, about your donors and how they want to be engaged with and communicated with.
Mm. We talk about segmentation. This is exactly what we're talking about right now. That
Hmm.
buzzword, this is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And I know some charities are using a spreadsheet. I did an entire video on that. Please don't. And some systems are so complex. I know the first time I used Razor's Edge, I couldn't make heads or tails of it and how to
Yeah.
pull the data that I
Yeah.
wanted. So there are systems out there like DonorDock that where you can punch in, I want donors who, maybe doing a lapsed donor campaign or a monthly donor campaign. I want to be able to easily pull that data from the database and then go through it and take action from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's another key point is that, again, we talked about it, if it's easy to pull, but then how can I use that data in a simple way? Can I, if I pull the list, can I easily get an email out to that group of people if that's what makes sense? Or can I, get a mailing list built out of that easily? And so, yeah, there are some solutions out there that I think overcomplicate some of those things, and then they become burdens to use. And then, once it becomes a burden and it's hard for your team and it's hard for you, then you don't want to use it. And now, I think the only thing worse than having no data is having like out of date or bad data, because now you're making decisions on what you think is data that's helpful, but in reality it's not. And so, having the right technology, you're right, spreadsheets, they have their use and they can be really powerful for certain things. As a donor management and a donor engagement tool, there's a lot of better options out there that even, very cost effective things that can work really well. And DonorDock is one
Yeah.
of those, but there's plenty of other good solutions that can really help level up a nonprofit for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I think my biggest fear with them is they're not secure.
Yeah.
They're
Yep.
just not.
Yep.
I wouldn't mind going back to data silos because I know
Hmm.
so many organizations that their volunteer coordinator is running one database, as
Hmm.
fundraisers we're running another, and maybe none of those integrate with our accounting software. So what's your advice for integrating all of your databases?
Yeah, I think you got really two options there. One is you can kind of go down the path of I'm going to try and find like an all-in-one solution that does a lot of what I need it to do, in one software product or one piece of technology. And there are certainly advantages to that. You've inherently removed the data silos if you can get and consolidate down to a single piece of software. And that's just native. I mean, the tool is built in. I think some of the downsides that you might run into with that type of approach are sometimes if something's an all-in-one solution, it may not go very deeply into some areas, and so because it lacks focus, it may lack that vendor may lack expertise in a certain area, so they've built out some functionality that may not be up to par if you were to go the other path, which is to trying to build kind of a best in class solution. And I think when you look at that, that might mean having multiple software products, but as long as those software products work well and integrate well and talk with each other, you're breaking down those silos in that way as well. But with that, you're able to leverage the deep expertise that these vendors may have in a certain area and probably a more robust feature set around that area. And so, some specific examples that I can think of, if you look at the volunteer, you brought up volunteers, you look at a solution like Golden Volunteer Management. It's very purpose driven to help manage the volunteer ecosystem within a nonprofit and does a great job of doing those pieces. But what it is not is a donor CRM, a donor database, or a fundraising tool in the same way that some other solutions are. You have your front end fundraising tools like Classy or One Cause, maybe they're event fundraising type solutions, and they are very specific and do that really, really well. And then you may have solutions that are more of the donor CRM. That would be a DonorDock or Bloomerang. And those solutions may have some of those features as well, but maybe aren't built out the same way that those specialized vendors are. So if you can find a solution that plays well with others and does have some of those integrations, then you can really, in a more simplistic way, bring together solutions that really work well at the piece that they're doing. But you get the benefit that they're talking together. So you're not creating those silos of, this person's using this system and that data doesn't know anything about this data over here. That can be really, really challenging to run a nonprofit on. And that really goes all the way down to spreadsheets. Like if you are using spreadsheets to manage your nonprofit and you've got 6 different spreadsheets for different things within your organization, you are duplicating data likely. You are trying to manage data that is likely has a lot of overlap, but none of that's updating anywhere else. So you're really running into, again, accuracy and security can be really concerns with that. And I think Excel is probably one of the best examples of where data silos can really create a lot of problems within an organization. So multiple ways to tackle it. I think the key outcome that you're looking for is that you have a set of data that is accurate, up to date, and that you can trust across whatever tools that you're using, so that you have that kind of single source of truth when it comes to, your donors, your volunteers, your programs, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, I work with a lot of small grassroots organizations that don't have a CRM yet. So we begin to build them up CRMs, and that's one of the big things is, does it integrate? Will it integrate? Because you might be using this event management platform, but we need it to be able to integrate. And yeah, their volunteer databases, but yeah, that's always my first thing is just get a CRM.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't imagine how you can operate without one. Even if you
Yeah.
only have 10 donors, it's still worth it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that inherently becomes kind of that we think about like the CRM as being the hub in a hub and spoke model, where you may have
Yeah.
the different spokes that do different things, and again are purpose driven, event management or volunteer management or accounting. Like that's another area, but you need that data in all of that data coming into that kind of centralized hub, so that you can look one place and really understand what's going on within not only your nonprofit as a whole, but all the way down to each individual donor relationship. And so I think that's kind of the panacea. Like that's the goal that we want to try and achieve. But I think CRM being that hub in that model, it makes a lot of sense, and it seems to kind of resonate with people when they can start to see, oh yeah, I can go one place and I have this full picture instead of having to look 8 different places to know what's going on.
Yep. And you get what you pay for. You
Yep.
really do. Yeah, you do. Okay, so I do want to talk about your podcast because I think that it's amazing. But is
Thank
there
you.
anything that you wanted to mention before we move on to that? Anything that I missed asking you?
No, I think that I think those are great conversation points that we've talked about. You mentioned AI. I think that's been an interesting buzzword topic, and something that we're certainly kind of interested in monitoring and even starting to implement within the product. And I think users will see a lot of changes coming, not just to DonorDock, but to like all software.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an exciting thing. And I think our big thing that we think about when it comes to AI and just automation, those types of things, goes back to something I said a little while ago, which is, really understanding how you can leverage and use those things as a nonprofit without losing the human component that we think is so important. We actually came up with an equation that we call the human connection equation. And it basically is this concept that if you look at humans as like the human relationships as the root of an equation, and then AI and automation can be kind of that exponential force to help you scale that. But if you start with 0 as the human piece, it doesn't matter what you add for the exponent, you're going to still be at 0. So that's something that we've been really kind of looking at, interested in. I think everybody wants that kind of silver bullet thing that just does everything and makes their life easier. And, we may be getting closer to having some of those things, but I find that to be a really interesting topic as well. So.
I can see how it would benefit you. So I started back in the olden days when the internet was brand new and we were pioneering online database technology, and just how the algorithms work, and training it to be able to go in and find that data for us that we want. So if I'm running a monthly donor campaign or lapsed donor, click one button and the system does all of the work and spits out my best possible prospects, and then learns from the
Yeah.
action that I take in that. That'll be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're doing some things where we're trying to kind of figure out how, or not figure out, but implement things like just like normal language queries where you could just ask the system like, what you're looking for just in normal human language, and it'll translate that into how to go ask the database to get that information and bring it back to you, different things like that, that I just think will be, make things easier. Our goal, one of our core values at DonorDock is simplicity, and we try and have that in the product, but still allowing it to be robust and powerful enough. And so I think that's where I get excited. Some of these emerging technologies, how can we basically take something that's inherently complicated and complex and kind of, insulate our users away from that complexity, and let the system kind of, deal with that for them so that they can just deal with things in a more simple way. So
Yeah, I love that. Do you have a discount that you can offer our viewers or subscribers that
yeah,
I
so
can throw a link?
we can, Joanne, we'll get you kind of a code that you can use specifically for this, for like 15% off of that first year's subscription.
Yeah, yeah, I'll throw that in the description as well. That's
Yeah.
perfect. I always like to get our viewers a
Yeah.
little something,
No, that's
something, you
great.
know?
Yep, for
Yeah.
sure. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, talk to me about Beyond the Donation podcast, because
Yep.
that's another fantastic resource for our viewers.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we started Beyond the Donation a little over a year ago, and our goal was really to, interview people within the space, within the industry that we feel like have good, educational content. And the name really comes from the idea that the donation that you get from a donor is just kind of that first thing that happens, and then what really matters is everything that happens beyond that donation. And so we interview and we talk with a lot of vendors, consultants, even other nonprofit leaders around best practices, things that they're doing. We try and make it things that are actually actionable when you get done with an episode, that you might be able to sit back down at your desk and actually get value out of. And I think that's maybe something that's fairly unique. I think a lot of times there's a lot of theoretical things that we talk about or people talk about, and then you're excited, it sounds great, and then you sit back down at your desk and you're like, I don't know where to even start with this. And so we do try and focus on trying to have some actionable things that you can really use to level up your nonprofit. Everything from marketing, nonprofit marketing, to fundraising, to volunteer managements, to grant writing. We've had experts come on and talk about all of those types of things. And we're always looking for, guests that we think have something that they can really bring to the nonprofit space, in terms of, being more efficient, being more effective at how we run and operate our organizations.
Well, yeah, I think I'm coming on the show, actually. I was talking
Yeah,
to
I
Sarah
think
about
so.
that. So I look forward to that. We'll see. I'm
Yes.
not sure what I'm talking about, but we all know I can talk.
Yeah,
So,
that'll be great. Now we're excited to have you on.
okay, perfect. Well, thank you again.
Yeah.
I'm so excited you were able to do this. I wanted an expert in the field, and well, hey, that's you. So
Well, I appreciate that. Thank
we'll
you.
put all of your contact information in the description, along with those links that you mentioned. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciated it, and it's been a joy talking to you.